I was on my knees, blood dripping onto the kitchen tiles, my right arm hanging useless at my side. My brother-in-law's breath reeked of beer as he stood over me, fists still clenched.
And through my blurry vision, I saw my sister. She didn't rush to help me.
She didn't even flinch. She just crossed her arms and said, "You should have signed the mortgage." That's when I knew they weren't family anymore.
And they were about to regret ever laying a hand on me.
If you've ever had someone you love betray you in the most brutal way possible and dreamed of seeing them get exactly what they deserve, you're going to want to hear this.
This isn't just a story about revenge.
It's about surviving when the people who should protect you are the ones holding the knife. So hit that like button, subscribe, and let's get into it. If you had asked me a year ago who I trusted most in my family, I would have said my sister, Marissa, without hesitation.
We were only 2 years apart, and growing up, she was my shadow.
If I had a secret, she was the first to know. If she needed someone to defend her, I was the first to step up. But somewhere along the way, adulthood took us down very different paths. I became the responsible one, the one who always had a budget spreadsheet, the one who never overdrafted her bank account, the one who paid her bills early just for peace of mind. I worked as a veterinary nurse, nothing glamorous, but I loved it. I had a modest one-bedroom apartment I'd renovated myself, second-hand furniture, thrift art on the walls, plants in every corner.
It was mine, and it was stable. Marissa?
She was different. The kind of person who treated life like a reality show, always chasing the next big thing.
New outfits she couldn't afford.
Luxury weekend getaways paid with credit cards she barely kept up with. Her motto might as well have been, "If it's not flashy, it's not worth it." And then there was Derek, my brother-in-law. He was the type of man you could spot across a room and know exactly who he was.
Loud. Opinionated.
Always a drink in his hand. The kind of guy who'd brag about winning a bar fight, as if getting arrested for disorderly conduct was some badge of honor. I never liked him, but I bit my tongue for Marissa's sake. When they announced they were house hunting, I already had a bad feeling. Their idea of budget was everyone else's idea of financial suicide. So it wasn't much of a shock when Marissa called me one Thursday night, her voice all sugary sweet. "Marissa, Audrey, babe, we found the one.
It's gorgeous.
4 bedrooms, huge backyard, perfect for when we start a family." Me, that sounds expensive. Marissa, well, yeah, but we can swing it. We just need you to be our guarantor.
That last word hit me like a lead weight. A guarantor.
Which meant if they missed a single payment, I would be on the hook.
My credit. My savings. My stability. I took a slow breath. Me, Marissa, I love you, but I can't do that.
I have my own financial goals, and this is too big a risk for me.
Silence. Then a laugh, sharp, humorless. Marissa, wow. Okay, guess I know where we stand. She hung up without saying goodbye.
I sat there staring at my phone, my stomach tight. It wasn't the first time she tried to pull me into one of her impulsive decisions, but something in her tone told me this refusal wasn't going to just blow over. The next day, I got a friend request from Derek on Facebook. Strange, since we'd never been close. When I accepted, his first post on my feed was a meme. "Don't ask broke people for advice, they'll just tell you to stay broke like them."
I should have seen the storm coming.
I thought maybe Marissa just needed a few days to cool off. We'd always had disagreements before. Sisters fight, sisters forgive, right? But this was different. It started with little things. A missed call from her that I knew was intentional. A cold tone in a family group chat. But then, it escalated. 2 days after the guarantor conversation, my phone buzzed at 7:42 a.m., a time Marissa knew I'd be rushing to get ready for work. "Marissa, you know, Derek and I would do this for you in a heartbeat." Me. "Marissa, it's not about love, it's about money, Anne." "Marissa, money? Family should come before money." She hung up before I could respond. That became the rhythm of my week. Some days, I'd get guilt trips. "If we lose this house, it's on you." Some days, emotional blackmail. "Mom and Dad are so disappointed in how selfish you're being." And some days, thinly veiled threats. "You'll regret not helping us." At family dinner the following Sunday, the tension was thick enough to taste. Mom kept her eyes on her plate. Dad cleared his throat every time I tried to speak. And Derek? He leaned back in his chair, watching me with this smug little smirk, like he knew something I didn't. When I excused myself to grab more salad from the kitchen, Derek followed. Derek, you think you're better than us? With your little apartment, your thrift store couch.
Me? This isn't about being better.
It's about not wanting to drown in someone else's debt.
Derek, you'll change your mind.
One way or another.
That last line, it wasn't a suggestion. It was a promise.
Over the next few weeks, I noticed the social media posts. Marissa sharing memes about selfish siblings, Derek writing vague status updates like, "Some people would rather watch you fail than lift a finger to help."
Mutual friends started asking if we were fighting.
My professional reputation even took a small hit when one of Marissa's friends, who happened to work at a vet clinic nearby, casually mentioned that I was stingy and self-centered.
I tried ignoring it. I told myself they'd get over it.
But deep down, I knew something ugly was building. And the night it finally boiled over, I would learn just how far Derek was willing to go to change my mind.
It was a Sunday afternoon when my phone buzzed with a message from Marissa.
"Marissa, come over for dinner. Let's talk.
Just us.
No drama."
I stared at it for a full minute. The wording was almost too nice. But part of me still wanted to believe my sister could put this behind her. Maybe this was her olive branch.
I baked a small loaf of banana bread before heading over, a peace offering. The drive to their house was quiet, my fingers drumming against the steering wheel as I rehearsed what I'd say.
Keep it calm. Keep it loving. Make her understand.
When I pulled into their driveway, the first thing I noticed was Derek's truck. The second thing was the faint thump of music coming from inside. The smell of roast chicken hit me the moment I stepped into the kitchen. Marissa was at the counter, wearing a perfect smile, wine glass in hand. Derek was slouched in a chair, beer bottle between his fingers, cheeks flushed with that familiar drunk redness.
"Marissa, Audrey, you came. Good. Sit, eat.
Let's be a family again." I relaxed, just a little, and took a seat. For the first 10 minutes, it was surprisingly normal.
Small talk. Compliments on the banana bread.
I started to think maybe I'd overreacted. Then, like a switch had been flipped, Derek leaned forward. "Derek, so, about that mortgage."
I froze, fork halfway to my mouth.
We've been through this."
"Derek, we have. And you keep saying no. I don't get it. We're family."
Marissa set down her wine and just watched.
No smile now. No warmth.
It's not about love or family.
It's about protecting myself.
You guys are buying a house you can't afford, and I'm not willing to risk my credit. That's when Derek slammed his fist on the table so hard my plate jumped. "Derek, you think you're better than us, don't you?
Sitting there all high and mighty.
Acting like you're smarter. This isn't about being better." "Derek, shut up." He stood, his chair scraping against the tile. My chest tightened. I pushed back from the table, but he was faster. His hands shoved hard against my shoulders, sending me stumbling into the counter.
Pain shot up my hip. Stop. He didn't.
His fist came down, connecting with my face.
The world went white hot. I tasted blood instantly.
Before I could even think, his other hand gripped my arm and yanked. A tearing, sickening pop in my shoulder made me scream.
My knees buckled. I hit the floor, gasping, my vision swimming.
And over all of it, I heard Marissa's voice, flat, almost bored. "Marissa, you should have signed the mortgage."
No rush to help me. No shock. No fear. Just cold.
In that moment, with blood dripping onto their pristine white tiles, I understood. This wasn't a family anymore.
This was war.
My ears were ringing, every sound muffled like I was underwater. My right arm hung useless at my side, pain radiating from my shoulder down to my fingertips. I tried to push myself up, but the moment I put weight on my arm, a sharp white flash exploded in my vision and I almost blacked out. Derek was still towering over me, breathing hard, beer breath thick in the air. "Derek, maybe now you'll think twice before screwing over family." Marissa just stood there, her arms crossed, watching like she was observing some petty argument instead of her husband assaulting her sister. Somehow, I managed to get to my feet, unsteady, leaning on the counter for balance.
My bag was by the front door. I didn't even bother with my shoes.
I stepped outside, the cold air hitting my face like a slap, and staggered toward my car. Every step sent a jolt of agony through my shoulder. I fumbled with my keys, my blood-slick fingers slipping twice before I finally got the door open.
I drove one-handed, gripping the steering wheel with my left.
My vision kept blurring, but I refused to stop.
There was only one place I could think to go.
By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway, my head was pounding and I could feel blood drying on my cheek.
I climbed the porch steps and knocked.
Mom opened the door, and her gasp was immediate.
"Mom. Oh my God.
Audrey, what happened?" I tried to answer, but my voice broke. "Me. Derek, he."
She pulled me inside, calling for Dad.
He came from the living room, eyes wide at the sight of me. They sat me on the couch, hovering, bringing me water, a towel, ice for my shoulder. But when I finally told them why, the mortgage, the fight, Marissa just standing there, something in the air shifted.
Dad rubbed his temples. "Dad. Well, you did refuse to help them."
"I'm not saying what he did was right, but you know how stressed they've been." The words cut deeper than Derek's fists. "Me. You're blaming me."
Mom avoided my eyes. "Mom, you know how your sister is.
Sometimes you just give a little to keep the peace." I stared at them, the realization hitting me like another punch. I wasn't going to get the protection or outrage I needed from them.
Not against Marissa. Not against Derek.
My body was broken, my shoulder throbbing with every heartbeat, but in that moment, something else broke, something you can't see on an X-ray. The hospital lights were too bright, the kind that made every surface feel sterile and cold. I sat on the exam table, my arm cradled in a sling they'd hastily put on in triage, dried blood still crusted around my nostrils. The doctor's voice was calm, clinical. "Doctor, you've got a dislocated shoulder, a broken nose, and a mild concussion. You'll be sore for weeks, maybe longer. I'll refer you to physical therapy." I nodded, my gaze fixed on the floor.
Then the nurse came in.
She was middle-aged, with kind eyes, and she lowered her voice so only I could hear. "Nurse, do you want us to call the police? You don't have to, but don't let them scare you into dropping charges."
Her words sank deep.
I realized in that moment, if I didn't fight back now, Derek would do this again. Maybe to me.
Maybe to someone else. And Marissa? She'd just keep standing there. I said yes.
Minutes later, 2 officers walked in, a tall man with a notepad and a woman with a no-nonsense expression. They listened as I told them everything, from the mortgage fight to the moment I heard my sister's voice saying, "You should have signed the mortgage." The female officer's jaw tightened. "Officer, we'll need to take photos of your injuries and get a written statement tonight. You're doing the right thing." By the next morning, Derek had been taken into custody. But almost immediately, Marissa started her own counterattack, a smear campaign. She told our relatives that I'd lost my temper and attacked Derek first, that I was trying to ruin their lives over a little argument. She posted vague Facebook statuses about people who pretend to be victims.
Some cousins stopped replying to my texts. A few old friends unfollowed me.
My parents urged me to just drop it before things get uglier. But the thing is, they were already ugly. And every whisper against me, every false rumor, was just more fuel on the fire building inside. This wasn't going to end with me licking my wounds in silence.
No.
I was going to make sure Derek and Marissa both paid for what they'd done, not just in court, but in ways they never saw coming. I knew one thing. If I tried to handle this alone, Derek would weasel his way out with some mutual fight nonsense, and Marissa would make sure my name stayed tarnished in every corner of our social circle. So I called the most ruthless lawyer I could find, not the friendly we'll work something out type, but the kind who smiled like a shark when she saw a case she could sink her teeth into.
Her name was Clara Vance, and she didn't believe in half measures. The first meeting, she laid it out plainly.
"Clara, we're pushing for maximum sentencing.
No plea deals.
We'll get you a restraining order, and we'll make sure every scrap of evidence paints Derek for exactly what he is, violent, reckless, and a liability to anyone around him."
I handed over everything I had.
Photos of my injuries from the hospital. The texts where Marissa and Derek had tried to pressure me into co-signing. Screenshots of their passive-aggressive social media posts. A neighbor's statement saying they'd heard yelling and seen me run out with blood on my face.
Clara's eyes lit up.
"Clara, oh, he's done." But I wasn't stopping at the assault case. Through a friend in banking, I learned that Derek and Marissa were still trying to secure that house. In fact, they had a pending mortgage application. I called the lender anonymously and provided the police report, the restraining order application, and Derek's arrest record. The next day,
Their loan was dead in the water.
Then I remembered something Derek had bragged about at a barbecue months ago, an old DUI case that he'd skated out of with probation. Clara made a few calls, and we tipped off his probation officer with proof that he'd been drinking heavily the night of the assault.
That little stunt earned him a formal violation hearing.
Meanwhile, I started quietly rebuilding my social reputation. I sent a group message to every mutual friend who'd distanced themselves, attaching hospital photos and the full timeline of events. Some didn't respond, but others replied with outrage, and more than a few admitted they'd been told a very different version of the story.
It was like setting off a series of dominoes.
Derek and Marissa were about to learn what it felt like to lose control of the narrative. And I was going to watch every piece of their carefully crafted life crumble, starting with the courtroom. The day of the hearing felt like walking into a movie where the villain finally gets cornered. I sat in the front row of the courtroom, Clara at my side, and watched Derek shuffle in wearing an ill-fitting county-issued jumpsuit. His hair was greasy, his eyes bloodshot. He looked nothing like the smug man who'd once thought he could talk me into co-signing his dream house.
Marissa wasn't seated beside him.
Instead, she was in the back, sunglasses on, looking like she'd aged 10 years. I knew why. Without Derek's name on the mortgage, the deal had fallen apart.
They'd been forced to back out, losing their deposit and their dream home in one blow.
Clara opened with the hospital records, graphic photos of my injuries, and the neighbor's eyewitness account. She read Derek's threatening texts aloud, his own words, dripping with entitlement and anger, echoing in the silent courtroom. Derek's lawyer tried to spin it as a momentary lapse in judgment.
But Clara?
She smiled and leaned forward like a predator. Clara, a lapse doesn't come with a history of violence, probation violations, and a calculated smear campaign against the victim.
This wasn't an accident.
This was a pattern. When the judge spoke, his tone was cold steel. Judge, Mr. Miller, you've shown a consistent disregard for the law and the safety of others. I'm revoking your probation. You will serve 18 months in county jail for the assault, plus an additional 6 months for the violation.
Derek's jaw went slack.
18 months. Marissa's hand flew to her mouth, and for a split second, she looked like she might faint.
But it didn't stop there.
Outside the courtroom, the fallout hit like a second wave. Derek lost his job within a week. His employer didn't want the liability. His probation officer flagged him for alcohol counseling, further delaying his release eligibility. The couple's landlord served them a 30-day eviction notice once their legal trouble hit the local news. And the friends who'd once bought into their poor us narrative?
They weren't buying it anymore.
After I sent them the evidence, Derek and Marissa became social pariahs.
Invitations dried up. Their little weekend get-togethers vanished.
The last I heard, Marissa moved back in with her parents. Derek was still behind bars, trying to fight his eviction from a cell.
And me?
I walked out of that courthouse into the sunlight, free of the weight they'd tried to dump on me. I didn't just win the case, I won back my voice, my reputation, and my peace.
Some people think revenge is about anger. But for me, it was about restoration. Derek and Marissa had tried to take my future.
Instead, they lost theirs. Walking out of that courthouse, I realized something powerful. The best revenge isn't about screaming louder than the people who wronged you. It's about standing your ground, stacking the truth brick by brick, and letting it crush their lies under its own weight. Derek and Marissa thought they could rewrite my story, paint me as the villain, drain me of resources, and move on with their perfect little life. Instead, they wrote themselves into a corner they couldn't escape from. I used to think closure came from an apology. But this wasn't about hearing sorry, it was about watching justice work, slowly and methodically, until the people who hurt me had no way out. They lost their home, their friends, their future. And I walked away stronger, smarter, and untouchable in ways they'll never be.
The truth is, some bridges burn themselves.
All you have to do is make sure you're standing on solid ground when they fall.
So, what do you think?
Did Derek get what he deserved, or do you think 18 months was too light for what he did? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one of them. And if you've ever had someone try to turn your pain into their leverage, remember, sometimes the best way to win is to let them dig their own grave while you keep building your future. If you like this story, hit like, subscribe to Shadow of Revenge, and share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that karma is patient, but it never forgets.